The Manhattan courthouse erupted in chaos as billionaire Marcus Hale sat alone at the defendant's table, his entire legal team having abandoned him moments before the most critical hearing of his life. The prosecution smirked, victory assured, until a voice cut through the pandemonium. "I will defend him." Every head turned to see Walter Gibson, the courthouse janitor, stepping forward with unwavering determination, his worn hands gripping a tattered bar card that hadn't seen daylight in 15 years. Welcome to a story where justice wears a janitor's uniform and courage trumps credentials. Stay with me until the end and drop a comment about which city you're watching from. I'd love to see how far this incredible tale travels. The September rain hammered against the towering windows of the Manhattan Supreme Court, each droplet racing down the glass like tears on the face of justice itself. Inside Courtroom 7B, Marcus Hale sat motionless. His usually commanding presence diminished to that of a man watching his empire crumble in real time. The Armani suit that once made him look invincible now seemed to hang on him like borrowed armor too heavy for shoulders that had carried the weight of innovation for 2 decades. Just 15 minutes ago, his lead attorney Harrison Blackwood of Blackwood Sterling and Associates had gathered his team of 12 lawyers, packed their briefcases with theatrical precision, and walked out. Not a word of explanation, not a glance back, just the sharp click of Italian leather shoes against marble floors fading into silence. "Mr. Hale?" Judge Patricia Thornton's voice cut through the suffocating quiet. "The court cannot proceed without your legal representation. Do you wish to request a continuance?" Marcus's jaw clenched. He knew what a continuance meant: more time for his enemies to tighten the noose, more days for the media to paint him as the villain in a story they didn't understand. His revolutionary clean energy technology, dubbed Project Aurora, had threatened too many powerful interests. Now those interests had orchestrated his downfall with surgical precision, framing him for embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy charges that could lock him away for life. "Your Honor." Prosecutor Diana Chen rose with predatory grace, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "The state objects to any delay. Mr. Hale has had ample opportunity to secure representation. His counsel's abandonment speaks volumes about the merits of his defense." The gallery buzzed with whispers. Reporters' fingers flew across tablets crafting headlines about the fallen tech giant's final humiliation. Marcus could feel the walls closing and each second ticking away like a countdown to his destruction. That's when Walter Gibson set down his mop. For 20 years, Walter had been invisible in these halls of justice, a ghost in blue overalls who cleaned up after the daily theater of human conflict. Judges walked past him without acknowledgement. Lawyers treated him like furniture. But Walter had been watching, listening, learning. And more importantly, he had been remembering. "Your Honor." Walter's deep voice boomed across the courtroom, causing every conversation to cease mid-sentence. "I will defend him." The silence that followed was absolute, the kind that makes your ears ring with its intensity. Then, like a dam breaking, the courtroom exploded. "Security!" someone shouted. "Is this some kind of joke?" Prosecutor Chen's face flushed crimson. Judge Thornton's gavel cracked like thunder. "Order, order!" She fixed her steel-gray eyes on Walter, who stood tall despite the weight of hundreds of stairs. "Sir, this is a court of law, not a—" "I know exactly what this is, Your Honor." Walter reached into his back pocket and pulled out a worn leather wallet. From it he extracted a card so old its edges had yellowed, so fragile it seemed held together by memory alone. "Walter Gibson, attorney at law. Bar number 19847. I passed the New York State Bar in 1995. The judge leaned forward, squinting at the approaching bailiff, who carried the card to her like it was a holy relic. "Mr. Gibson, even if this is legitimate, you haven't practiced in 15 years, 7 months, and 12 days. Walter finished, his eyes never leaving hers. "But my license was never revoked, never suspended. I'm still a member in good standing of the New York State Bar Association. I have the right to represent Mr. Hale if he'll have me." Marcus Hale had built his fortune reading people understanding their motivations before they understood them themselves. Looking at Walter Gibson, he saw something that made him lean forward in his chair. Not desperation, not grandstanding, but purpose. Raw, undiluted purpose. "Your Honor," Diana Chen shot to her feet. "This is highly irregular. This man is a janitor. He cleans toilets, for God's sake." "I do," Walter replied calmly, turning to face her. "I also clean up messes. And from where I'm standing, Ms. Chen, this entire case is the biggest mess I've seen in 20 years of working in this building." A ripple of nervous laughter passed through the gallery before the judge's glare silenced it. "Mr. Gibson." Judge Thornton's tone carried a warning. "Practicing law isn't something you can simply pick up after a 15-year hiatus. The legal landscape has changed dramatically. Digital filing systems, new precedents, updated procedures." "With respect, Your Honor," Walter interrupted, causing several veteran court watchers to gasp at his audacity. "Justice hasn't changed. Truth hasn't changed. And if I may..." He gestured to the prosecution's table where 6 attorneys sat, surrounded by boxes of evidence and multiple computer screens. "Ms. Chen has an army. Mr. Hale has no one. Doesn't the Constitution guarantee him representation? Or does that only apply when the representation comes in a $1,000 suit?" The judge's fingers drummed against her bench. Around them, the courtroom held its collective breath. Marcus watched Walter with growing fascination. The man's hands were calloused from years of manual labor, his face weathered by time and hardship, but his eyes burned with an intelligence that couldn't be dimmed by circumstance. "Mr. Hale," the judge finally spoke, "the choice is yours. You may accept Mr. Gibson's offer of representation, request a continuance to find new counsel, or proceed pro se. But I must warn you, accepting Mr. Gibson's representation under these circumstances could be grounds for appeal should the verdict not go in your favor." Marcus stood slowly, his movement drawing every eye in the room. For the first time in weeks, he felt something other than dread. He felt curiosity. "Your Honor, I'd like 5 minutes to speak with Mr. Gibson privately." "Granted. We'll take a brief recess." The gavel came down with finality. As the courtroom buzzed with activity, Walter approached Marcus with measured steps. Up close, Marcus could see the fine lines around the man's eyes, the slight tremor in his left hand that suggested an old injury, the way he carried himself not with the swagger of the lawyers Marcus was used to, but with quiet dignity. "Why?" Marcus asked simply once they were relatively alone in the corner of the courtroom. Walter's response was equally direct. "Because I know what it's like to lose everything to a rigged system. And because I've been watching this case, Mr. Hale. Every document that's been filed, every motion, every piece of evidence. You're being railroaded." "You've been following my case?" Marcus's eyebrows rose. "I've been following every case in this courthouse for 20 years, Walter replied. "It's amazing what people say when they think no one important is listening. Lawyers discussing strategy in the bathrooms, prosecutors celebrating convictions before trials even start, judges making deals in empty hallways." Marcus studied the man before him. "You were a lawyer. What happened?" A shadow crossed Walter's face. "That's a story for another time. Right now, you need to decide if you're willing to bet your life on a janitor with a law degree. You realize what you're up against." Marcus gestured to the prosecution table. "Chen's conviction rate is 93%. She has unlimited resources, the full weight of the state behind her, and she's corrupt," Walter finished quietly. "I heard her on the phone yesterday in the storage closet on the 3rd floor. She didn't know I was changing supplies in the next room. She was promising someone named Reynolds that you'd be convicted by Friday, that Project Aurora would be buried, and that the patents would be available for acquisition by Monday morning." Marcus's blood ran cold. Reynolds, Thomas Reynolds, CEO of Titan Energy Corporation, his biggest competitor and the man who stood to gain the most from Project Aurora's demise. "You heard this," Marcus whispered urgently. "I hear everything, Mr. Hale. The question is, Do you trust me to use what I know?" Before Marcus could respond, the bailiff announced the judge's return. The moment of decision had arrived. Marcus stood and faced the court. "Your Honor, I accept Mr. Gibson's representation." The reaction was immediate and explosive. Reporters nearly climbed over each other to get pictures. The prosecution table erupted in protests. Diana Chen looked like she'd swallowed something bitter. "This is a mockery," Chen declared. "Your Honor, I move for immediate dismissal of Mr. Gibson as counsel. He clearly lacks the competence to—" "On what grounds?" Walter's voice cut through her tirade like a blade. He walked to the defense table with purposeful strides, no longer the invisible janitor, but something else entirely, something that made Chen take an involuntary step back. "On the grounds that you're not qualified," Chen sputtered. "Am I not?" Walter picked up a document from the prosecution's filing. "This motion you filed yesterday, Commonwealth v. Hale, seeking to exclude defense witnesses based on Federal Rule of Evidence 403. You cited Peterson v. State 2019. Interesting choice, counselor." He looked up at her with a slight smile. "Especially since Peterson was overturned by the Second Circuit 3 months ago in Matthews v. Crawford. But you knew that, didn't you? You were hoping no one would check." Chen's face went pale. Judge Thornton leaned forward. "Is this true, Ms. Chen?" Your Honor, I wasn't aware." "You weren't aware?" Walter's voice rose slightly. The lead prosecutor in a case involving hundreds of millions of dollars wasn't aware of a crucial appellate decision. Either you're incompetent or you're deliberately misleading this court. Which would you prefer to admit to, counselor? The courtroom was silent, except for the furious scratching of reporters' pens and the soft whir of courtroom cameras. Judge Thornton's expression had changed from skepticism to interest. "Mr. Gibson, I assume you have more to say about the prosecution's case." "I do, Your Honor. But first, I'd like to address the elephant in the room." Walter turned to face the gallery, his voice carrying to every corner. "Yes, I'm a janitor. Yes, I clean this courthouse. And yes, I haven't practiced law in 15 years. But during those 15 years, I've had the unique privilege of watching justice and injustice from a perspective none of you have ever considered." He moved to the center of the courtroom, commanding the space like he'd never left it. "I've seen prosecutors hide evidence in supply closets thinking no one would notice the boxes tucked behind cleaning supplies. I've heard defense attorneys admit their client's guilt while laughing over coffee in empty courtrooms at 6 a.m. I've watched judges accept envelopes in parking garages at night when they thought all the service staff had gone home." Several people in the gallery shifted uncomfortably. Judge Thornton's face remained impassive, but her eyes were sharp. "But more than that," Walter continued. "I've spent these years studying. Every night after my shift, I read case law. Every break, I studied new precedents. Every moment I could steal, I prepared for the day when someone would need what I could offer, not just legal knowledge, but the truth about how this system really works." He turned back to Marcus. "Mr. Hale, you've been charged with embezzling $50 million from your own company. The prosecution claims you diverted funds meant for Project Aurora into offshore accounts. They have bank records, emails, witness testimony. It looks damning." Walter paused, letting the weight of the charges hang in the air. "It's also completely fabricated." Diana Chen shot to her feet. "Objection. Defense counsel is making accusations without evidence." Walter reached into his janitor's cart, which still sat by the courtroom door where he'd left it. From beneath cleaning supplies, he pulled out a thick folder. "Your Honor, I move to submit Defense Exhibit 1 security footage from this building's parking garage, showing Ms. Chen meeting with Thomas Reynolds of Titan Energy on September 3rd, 10th, and 17th. Each meeting occurred the night before a major development in this case." The courtroom erupted. Judge Thornton hammered her gavel repeatedly. "Order, Mr. Gibson. This evidence should have been submitted through proper channels." "I tried, Your Honor, 3 times. Each time the submissions mysteriously disappeared from the clerk's office. Fortunately, I keep copies." Walter produced two more identical folders. One for the court, one for the prosecution, and one for the defense. I also have digital copies on multiple secure servers, in case these happen to disappear as well. Chen's face had gone from pale to ashen. This is inadmissible. He obtained this footage illegally. He had no right. Actually, Walter interrupted calmly, as a courthouse employee, I have full access to all security footage for maintenance and safety purposes. It's in my employment contract. Section 7, subsection 3 if you'd like to review it. Marcus watched in amazement as his janitor-turned-lawyer systematically dismantled the prosecution's composure. But Walter wasn't finished. Your Honor, I'd also like to address the matter of Mr. Hale's previous counsel's sudden departure. Walter's eyes found Harrison Blackwood in the gallery, trying to slip out quietly. Mr. Blackwood, would you care to explain to the court why you abandoned your client 15 minutes before a critical hearing? Blackwood froze at the door. I don't have to answer that. No, you don't, Walter agreed. But perhaps you'd like to explain this. He pulled out his phone and held it up. I have here a recording legally obtained in a public space with no expectation of privacy of you accepting a payment of $2 million from Titan Energy's legal department to abandon Mr. Hale's case at precisely 9:45 this morning. The courtroom descended into chaos. Reporters rushed for the doors, phones already at their ears. Blackwood's face turned crimson, then white. Judge Thornton stood, her voice booming over the noise. Everyone sit down. No one leaves this courtroom. The bailiffs moved to block the exits. The judge's face was thunderous. Mr. Gibson, you're making extremely serious allegations. I hope you can substantiate them. Every word, Your Honor. Walter moved back to the defense table, pulling out document after document. The conspiracy against Mr. Hale goes deeper than simple corporate competition. We're talking about a coordinated effort involving multiple corporations, government officials, and yes, members of the legal community to suppress revolutionary technology that threatens the entire fossil fuel industry. Diana Chen tried once more to regain control. Your Honor, this is conspiracy theory nonsense. Mr. Gibson is trying to distract from the clear evidence against his client. The forged evidence, you mean? Walter held up a bank statement. This document, which the prosecution claims shows Mr. Hale transferring funds to the Cayman Islands, has a fascinating flaw. The account number referenced, it wasn't created until 3 days after the alleged transfer took place. I verified this with the Cayman National Bank this morning. Chen's mouth opened and closed, like a fish gasping for air. Additionally, Walter continued warming to his theme. The email evidence the prosecution provided shows messages supposedly sent from Mr. Hale's computer. But the metadata which the prosecution conveniently failed to include in discovery shows these emails were created on a computer registered to Titan Energy's IT department. Marcus felt a surge of hope for the first time in months. This man, this janitor, who'd been invisible in plain sight, was doing what a team of high-priced lawyers had failed to do. He was fighting back with truth. Judge Thornton sat back in her chair, her expression unreadable. Ms. Chen, do you have a response to these allegations? Chen stood on shaky legs. Your Honor, we need time to review these claims. The prosecution requests a recess. Oh, I think we've had enough recesses, Walter interjected. Your Honor, I move for immediate dismissal of all charges against Mr. Hale based on prosecutorial misconduct and fabrication of evidence. I also move for an immediate investigation into Diana Chen, Harrison Blackwood, and Thomas Reynolds for conspiracy, bribery, and obstruction of justice. The judge was quiet for a long moment, her eyes moving between Walter Chen and Marcus. Mr. Gibson, what you're alleging, if true, represents one of the most significant cases of legal corruption this court has ever seen. It is true, Your Honor, and I can prove every bit of it. Walter's voice was steady, confident. But more importantly, we need to recognize what's really at stake here. Mr. Hale's Project Aurora could provide clean, renewable energy to millions of people at a fraction of current costs. The technology he's developed could literally save our planet. And there are people in this room who would rather see him rot in prison than allow that to happen. He turned to address the gallery, the reporters, the observers. This isn't just about one man's freedom. It's about whether we'll allow corporate interests to use our legal system as a weapon against progress. It's about whether justice is for sale to the highest bidder. A commotion at the back of the courtroom drew everyone's attention. A group of men in expensive suits had entered, their faces grim. Marcus recognized them immediately. Titan Energy's legal team, led by the infamous Robert Steele. "Your Honor," Steele's voice was smooth as oil. "I represent Titan Energy Corporation. We've been monitoring these proceedings with interest, and we'd like to address these baseless accusations." "You'll address nothing." Walter cut him off, his voice sharp as a blade. "You have no standing in this case, Mr. Steele. Unless, of course, you'd like to explain why you're here at all. How did you know to come to this particular hearing at this particular moment, unless you were already coordinating with the prosecution?" Steele's composure cracked slightly. "We maintain offices in this building. You happened to arrive with a full legal team 30 minutes after Mr. Blackwood abandoned his client. That's quite a coincidence." Walter pulled out another document. "Or perhaps it has something to do with this text message you sent to Diana Chen at 9:43 a.m. this morning. Package delivered. Proceeding as planned." "How did you—" Steele caught himself, but it was too late. Walter smiled grimly. "Amazing what people throw away in courthouse trash bins without shredding properly, especially when they're in a hurry." Judge Thornton stood abruptly. "That's enough. Bailiffs, no one else enters or leaves this courtroom. Mr. Steele, Ms. Chen, Mr. Blackwood, you'll all remain here while I contact the Judicial Review Board and the FBI." She turned to Walter. "Mr. Gibson, I'm granting a 24-hour recess. You'll use that time to organize your evidence properly and prepare for what I suspect will be a very different kind of trial." "Your Honor," Chen protested weakly. "This is—" "Ms. Chen, I strongly advise you to remain silent and contact your own attorney." The judge's voice was ice. "This court is adjourned." As the gavel came down, the courtroom erupted into motion. Reporters surged forward, shouting questions. The Titan Energy lawyers huddled in urgent conference. Diana Chen sat at the prosecution table, her head in her hands. Walter turned to Marcus and, for the first time, allowed himself a small smile. "Mr. Hale, we have work to do." Marcus shook his head in amazement. "Who are you really?" Walter's smile faded, replaced by something deeper, more complex. "I told you I'm the janitor. I clean up messes. And your case, Mr. Hale, is connected to the biggest mess I've ever seen." As they gathered the documents, Marcus noticed Walter's hands were steady, now the earlier tremor gone. "You planned this. All of it. You knew Blackwood would abandon me. You knew Chen was corrupt. You've been preparing for this moment." Walter paused in his packing. "I've been preparing for 15 years, Mr. Hale. Ever since the day they destroyed my life, using the same playbook they're using on you. The difference is, back then I didn't see it coming. I was naive, trusting. I believed in the system." "What happened to you?" Walter looked around the courtroom at the mahogany benches, the scales of justice mounted on the wall, the American flag hanging in the corner. "I was like you once, not a billionaire, but successful. I had a small firm specializing in environmental law. I took on a case against Titan Energy. They were dumping chemicals in a watershed that supplied 3 towns. I had evidence, witnesses, everything I needed to win." His voice grew quieter. "Then one day, I came home to find my daughter crying. She was 12. Someone had left photos at our house, photos that looked like me in compromising situations. They were fake, of course, but sophisticated enough that most people couldn't tell. The message was clear: drop the case, or the photos go public." Marcus felt his blood chill. "Did you drop it?" No. I fought. And they destroyed me. The photos appeared anyway. My wife left, took our daughter. The Bar Association launched an investigation based on anonymous tips. I was cleared eventually, but by then it was too late. My reputation was gone. My family was gone. My savings were depleted from legal fees. Titan Energy bought the judge, won the case, and continued poisoning those towns for another 5 years until the EPA finally stepped in. So you became a janitor to... What, hide? Walter's eyes flashed. To watch. To learn. To wait for the right moment and the right case. Your technology, Mr. Hale, it doesn't just threaten their profits. It could end their entire industry. That's why they're pulling out all the stops. That's why they've activated every corrupt contact they have. But this time they didn't count on someone who knows their playbook. Someone they can't buy or intimidate because I've already lost everything they could take. A bailiff approached them. Mr. Gibson, Judge Thornton would like to see you and Mr. Hale in her chambers. They followed the bailiff through a door beside the bench into a wood-paneled room lined with law books. Judge Thornton sat behind her desk, her robe hanging on a coat rack, looking older and more tired than she had on the bench. Sit, she said simply. Once they were settled, she fixed Walter with a penetrating stare. Walter Gibson, I remember you now, the Riverside watershed case. You were the lawyer who accused Judge Morrison of taking bribes. I was, and I was right. Yes, you were. Morrison retired quietly 2 years later, no charges filed. The system protected its own, as it always does. She paused. I was a junior prosecutor then. I wanted to pursue the case, but I was told to let it go, or find another career. And you let it go, Walter said without accusation. I did. I told myself I could do more good from within the system than outside it. I became a judge hoping to prevent what happened to you from happening to others. She laughed bitterly. And here we are 15 years later with the same players running the same games. She turned to Marcus. Mr. Hale, what Mr. Gibson uncovered today is just the tip of the iceberg. If you proceed with him as your counsel, you're not just fighting criminal charges. You're taking on an entire shadow system that has tentacles in government, law enforcement, media, and the judiciary itself. They will come at you with everything they have. They already are, Marcus replied. The question is, will the system actually work this time, or will they buy their way out again? Judge Thornton was quiet for a moment. That depends on how far you're willing to go and how much you're willing to risk. Mr. Gibson has already shown he's willing to risk everything. He has nothing left to lose. But you, Mr. Hale, you still have an empire even if it's under siege. Are you prepared to bet it all on a janitor's knowledge of where the bodies are buried? Before Marcus could answer, there was a knock on the door. The bailiff entered, his face pale. Your Honor, we have a situation. There's been a bomb threat called into the courthouse. They're evacuating the building, but they mentioned Mr. Hale by name. Said if he leaves the building, there are snipers waiting. The room fell silent. Walter stood slowly, his face grim but unsurprised. And so it begins. They're escalating faster than I expected. Judge Thornton reached for her phone. I'm calling the FBI directly. This has gone beyond legal maneuvering. With respect, Your Honor, Walter interrupted. At least 3 FBI agents in the New York office are on Titan's payroll. I've seen them meeting with Reynolds. If you call the main office, Hale might not make it through the night. Then what do you suggest? The judge asked. Walter moved to the window, peering through the blinds at the street below. I know every inch of this building, every service tunnel, every maintenance corridor, every forgotten passage from the renovations in the 80s. I can get Mr. Hale out safely, but we'll need a distraction. Marcus stood to join him at the window. This is insane. We're talking about a major corporation ordering assassinations in broad daylight. No, Walter corrected. We're talking about a shadow network that stands to lose hundreds of billions if your technology succeeds. They've killed for far less. He turned to the judge. Your Honor, there's an old prisoner transport tunnel that connects this building to the federal courthouse 2 blocks away. It was sealed in 2001, but the maintenance access was never properly blocked. I can get us through. If you're caught in those tunnels, then we're no worse off than if we walk out the front door into sniper fire. Walter's voice was matter of fact. Judge, I need you to do something for me. In exactly 10 minutes, have the bailiffs announce that Mr. Hale is being moved to protective custody via the main entrance. Make it loud. Make it obvious. Meanwhile, we'll go through the tunnels. The judge nodded slowly. And then we disappear for 24 hours, while I prepare the case that will bring them all down. Walter turned to Marcus. I have copies of everything, documents, recordings, files, hidden in places they'll never think to look. But I need you to trust me completely. Can you do that? Marcus looked at this man who'd spent 15 years in the shadows preparing for this moment. Do I have a choice? There's always a choice, Mr. Hale. You can walk out that front door and take your chances with the snipers. You can try to cut a deal with Reynolds, sell him Project Aurora, and hope he lets you live. Or you can trust a janitor who knows where all the dirt is swept. The building's fire alarm began to wail. Through the window, they could see people streaming out of the courthouse, police cars arriving with sirens blazing. It was chaos, perfect chaos for a disappearance. Let's go, Walter said, pulling a set of keys from his pocket that Marcus recognized as master maintenance keys. Your Honor, 10 minutes, and then pray for us. As they slipped out of the judge's chambers through a side door marked Authorized Personnel Only, Marcus couldn't help but think about the strange turns life takes. This morning he'd been a billionaire facing false charges with a team of high-priced lawyers. Now he was following a janitor through dusty service corridors, running for his life from assassins hired by corporations that wanted his technology buried. Walter moved through the passages with practiced ease, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. They descended stairs Marcus didn't know existed, passed through rooms filled with forgotten filing cabinets and obsolete equipment. The sounds of the evacuation grew distant, muffled by concrete and distance. Here, Walter whispered, stopping at what looked like a solid wall. He pressed a sequence of bricks and a section swung inward on hidden hinges. The tunnel. Stay close and move quietly. Sound carries strangely down here. They entered a cylindrical passage that smelled of rust and age. Their footsteps echoed despite their efforts at silence. Emergency lighting cast everything in a sickly green glow. Marcus found himself thinking about Project Aurora, about the years of work that had led to this moment. The technology could revolutionize energy production, make it clean and virtually free. No wonder they wanted him dead. Walter, he whispered, how did you know about my case, really? Walter paused, glancing back. Your assistant, Jennifer Chen, Diana's younger sister. She came to me 3 months ago, terrified. She'd discovered what her sister was planning, found documents she wasn't supposed to see. She knew they were going to frame you, but she didn't know who to trust. She'd noticed I was always around, always listening, never talking. She took a chance. Jennifer. But she is playing along to stay alive. She's been feeding me information while pretending to be loyal to the conspiracy. She's the one who told me about today's ambush. Walter resumed walking. Mr. Hale, there are good people caught up in this who want to do the right thing but are terrified. If we can break the power structure, give them protection, they'll come forward. They reached another door, this one marked with federal courthouse insignia. Walter produced another key, and they emerged into a similar maintenance area. We're under the federal building now. There's an exit to the parking garage that only maintenance staff use. I have a van there, nothing fancy, but it's invisible. No one notices a cleaning service van. As they made their way through the federal building's service areas, Marcus's phone buzzed. He looked at it instinctively, a message from Jennifer. They know you're not in the evacuation. Reynolds is mobilizing everything. Don't go to any of your properties. Don't contact anyone you normally would. Trust Walter. Destroying this phone now. Walter glanced at the message and nodded. Smart girl. Okay, here's what's going to happen. We're going to a place no one would ever think to look for you, my apartment in Queens. It's small. It's in a building full of immigrants who mind their own business. And most importantly, I've spent 15 years turning it into a legal research fortress. Everything we need is there. They reached the van, a battered white vehicle with Gibson Cleaning Services stenciled on the side in fading letters. As Walter started the engine, Marcus asked, "Gibson Cleaning Services?" "I actually do run a small cleaning company on the side. 4 employees, all former inmates who needed a second chance. It's legitimate, pays taxes completely above board. Another thing, they'd never suspect that the janitor they've ignored for 15 years is also a successful small business owner." As they pulled out of the garage, Walter took a circuitous route, doubling back several times, watching the mirrors constantly. "No tail," he confirmed after 20 minutes. "They're probably still trying to figure out how you vanished from a surrounded building." Marcus's phone rang. Harrison Blackwood. Walter shook his head. "Don't answer. From now on you're dark. The moment you surface, they'll triangulate your position." Marcus powered off the phone completely. As they drove through Queens, past bodegas and ethnic restaurants, past schools and small businesses, he felt himself entering a different world. Walter's world, where invisibility was protection and anonymity was power. "You know," Marcus said as they pulled into an alley behind a nondescript apartment building, "this morning I thought I'd lost everything. My lawyers, my reputation, possibly my freedom. But sitting here in a cleaning van with a janitor who just outsmarted the entire Titan Energy legal team, I'm starting to think this is exactly where I need to be." Walter smiled as he led Marcus up a back staircase. "Mr. Hale, you haven't lost everything. You've just shed the parts that were holding you back. Now let me show you what 15 years of preparation looks like." He opened the door to his apartment, and Marcus gasped. The small living space had been converted into what looked like a law library merged with a command center. Books lined every wall. Legal documents were organized in countless filing cabinets, and multiple computer screens showed various news feeds and legal databases. But what caught Marcus's attention most was the wall dedicated entirely to his case photos, documents, connections drawn in red string like something from a detective movie. At the center was Project Aurora's schematic, surrounded by pictures of every major player in the conspiracy against him. "Welcome to the real defense headquarters," Walter said, closing multiple locks on the door. "Now we have 23 hours to prepare for tomorrow's hearing, and I promise you by the time we walk back into that courtroom, we're going to have enough evidence to not just clear your name, but to bring down the entire network that tried to destroy you." Marcus studied the wall, seeing connections he'd never imagined, depths to the conspiracy that chilled him. "Walter, this is... How long have you been investigating this?" "Since the day Jennifer came to me. But really, I've been preparing for this fight since the day they destroyed my life. Every corrupt judge I've documented, every backroom deal I've recorded, every piece of evidence they thought was safely destroyed, it all leads to tomorrow." Walter moved to one of the computers. "They made one crucial mistake, Mr. Hale. They assumed the janitor was just part of the furniture. They never realized that the best place to hide a weapon is in plain sight." As night fell over Queens, the two men worked side by side, the billionaire and the janitor, united in their quest for justice. Outside, the city hummed with its usual energy, unaware that in a small apartment above a Korean grocery store, a revolution was being planned that would shake the foundations of corporate power. Tomorrow would bring the real fight. But tonight, for the first time in months, Marcus Hale felt something he'd thought was lost forever: hope. And it had come from the most unexpected source, a man who'd spent 15 years cleaning up other people's messes, preparing for the day he could clean up the biggest mess of all. The first rays of dawn crept through the grimy windows of Walter's apartment, casting long shadows across the wall of evidence. Marcus hadn't slept, couldn't sleep, not with the weight of what they'd uncovered pressing down on him. Walter sat at his computer, his fingers flying across the keyboard with the precision of a concert pianist pulling up document after document from encrypted drives. "They're moving," Walter said, suddenly his eyes fixed on a news feed. "Look at this." The headline screamed across the screen. "Billionaire Marcus Hale missing after courthouse bomb threat. FBI launches manhunt." Below it, a photo of Marcus from happier times, alongside speculation that he'd fled to avoid prosecution. "They're controlling the narrative," Marcus muttered, anger rising in his chest. "Making me look guilty before we even get back to court." Walter turned from the screen, his expression calm. "Let them. Every lie they tell now is another piece of evidence for us. I've been recording everything, screen capturing every article, documenting every false statement. When we reveal the truth, their own words will hang them." A soft knock at the door made both men freeze. Walter moved silently to a monitor showing the hallway camera feed. A young woman stood there nervously glancing around. Jennifer Chen. "It's okay," Walter said, noticing Marcus tense. "I told her to come if things got bad." He opened the door quickly, pulling Jennifer inside. Her usually immaculate appearance was disheveled, her eyes red from crying or lack of sleep, maybe both. "They killed someone," she said without preamble, her voice shaking. "A janitor at the courthouse. They thought it was you, Walter. He was about your height, your build. They shot him in the parking garage an hour ago." Walter's face went rigid. Tommy Rodriguez." Jennifer nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "He was wearing a Gibson Cleaning Services uniform. They didn't even check. They just... Diana called me celebrating. She said you were dead, that now nothing could stop them." Marcus watched Walter sink into a chair, the weight of another man's death settling on his shoulders. Tommy Rodriguez, he learned, was one of Walter's employees, a former inmate who'd been turning his life around, supporting 3 kids and a sick wife. "This is my fault," Walter whispered, his hands covering his face. "I should have warned them all to stay away from the courthouse." "No," Marcus said firmly. "This is on them. On Diana Chen and Reynolds and everyone else involved in this conspiracy. They're the killers, not you." Jennifer pulled a flash drive from her pocket. "Before I ran, I copied everything from Diana's computer. She thinks I'm at home, scared and compliant. She has no idea I've been helping you." She handed the drive to Walter. "There's something on here you need to see. It's about your daughter." Walter's head snapped up. "Rebecca? What about Rebecca?" "She's been investigating Titan Energy too. She's a journalist now, working for the Washington Post under a different name. Diana found out last week. They're planning to use her as leverage against you if you survive today's hearing." The room fell silent. Marcus watched emotions play across Walter's face. Fear, anger, determination, and something else. Something fierce and paternal that transformed the mild-mannered janitor into something dangerous. "Where is she now?" Walter asked, his voice deadly quiet. "DC. But they've sent people. You need to warn her." Walter moved to a different computer, one separated from his main network. His fingers danced across keys, entering passwords and navigating through encrypted channels Marcus didn't recognize. Within minutes, a video call connected. A young woman appeared on screen, her face a feminine echo of Walter's features. "Dad!" Rebecca's voice was shocked. "How are you? This is a secure line. How did you even—" "Rebecca, listen carefully. You need to get out of your apartment right now. Don't pack. Don't hesitate. Just leave. Go to the safe house, the one we talked about when you were 16. Remember." Her journalistic instincts kicked in immediately. "What's happened? Is this about my Titan Energy investigation? They know who you are. They've already killed one person today thinking it was me. You have maybe 10 minutes before they reach you. Move. Now." Marcus saw the younger woman's eyes widen, but she didn't argue. The screen showed her grabbing a bag already prepared for quick departure. "Dad, I have evidence too. Everything I've gathered over the past 2 years. It's all backed up in the cloud system I taught you to use. I know. I'm proud of you, Rebecca. Now go. We'll talk when you're safe." The connection ended. Walter sat back, his entire body taut with tension. She's smart. She'll make it. Jennifer had been examining the wall of evidence while they talked. Mr. Gibson, this is incredible. You've documented everything. But how do we get it admitted in court? Diana will object to everything, claim it's inadmissible that you obtained it illegally. Walter stood, moving to a specific filing cabinet. That's where Mr. Hale comes in. He pulled out a thick folder. Marcus, you still have friends on the Judiciary Committee, don't you? People who owe you favors from before all this started. Marcus thought of Senator Patricia Hayes, whose campaign he'd supported years ago, and Judge Christopher Dunn from the Second Circuit Court of Appeals, whom he'd helped when his son needed experimental medical treatment. A few, but reaching out to them now would let them know you're alive and where you are, Walter finished. But what if we didn't reach out directly? What if the evidence reached them through channels that couldn't be traced back to us? For the next 3 hours, they worked with surgical precision. Jennifer used her sister's own computer remotely. She'd installed backdoor access months ago to send encrypted packages to journalists at major newspapers. Walter uploaded documents to WikiLeaks-style platforms using routing systems that would take weeks to trace. Marcus wrote personal appeals to his allies, each one tailored to remind them of their obligations without seeming like blackmail. As noon approached, Walter's phone rang. Judge Thornton's personal number. Mr. Gibson. Her voice was strained. I'm calling to inform you that if Mr. Hale doesn't appear in court by 2 p.m., I'll have no choice but to issue a bench warrant. We'll be there, Your Honor. Walter. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. They've replaced half my security detail with Titan's people. I recognize 2 of them from the surveillance footage you showed me. If you come through the front door, we won't. Trust me, Your Honor. When we appear, it will be in a way they don't expect, and we'll have everything we need to end this. After ending the call, Walter turned to Marcus and Jennifer. It's time. Jennifer, you need to stay here. If something happens to us, release everything. Every document, every recording, every piece of evidence. Flood the internet with it. Jennifer nodded, her face pale but determined. Walter handed Marcus a suit from his closet. It's not Armani, but it's clean and it fits. We're going to walk into that courtroom like we own it. As Marcus changed, he asked, How are we getting in? You heard the judge, they've compromised courthouse security. Walter smiled, and for the first time, Marcus saw the brilliant lawyer he'd once been shining through. We're going in through the front door, but not alone. 30 minutes later, Marcus understood. As their van approached the courthouse, he saw them, hundreds of people gathering on the steps. Construction workers, janitors, secretaries, food service employees, maintenance staff from buildings throughout the financial district. Walter's true network, the invisible army that kept the city running. Tommy Rodriguez had a lot of friends, Walter explained. When word got out that Titan had him killed thinking he was me, they decided enough was enough. Every service worker in Lower Manhattan is walking off the job right now. The entire financial district is grinding to a halt. Among the crowd, Marcus spotted familiar faces, former employees of his who'd been laid off when the legal trouble started. Engineers who'd worked on Project Aurora, even some journalists who'd been investigating Titan for years. At the center of it all stood a woman in her 60s wearing a Gibson Cleaning Services uniform. That's Maria Rodriguez, Walter said softly. Tommy's wife. I called her this morning, told her everything. She said Tommy would want us to finish this. As they exited the van, the crowd parted, creating a corridor. The media, already gathered for the hearing, turned their cameras on this unexpected scene. Marcus heard reporters scrambling to understand what was happening. Mr. Hale, one shouted. Where have you been? Are you turning yourself in? Another called. Walter stepped forward, his voice carrying across the plaza. Mr. Hale is entering the courthouse to defend himself against false charges, and I'm his attorney. We have evidence that will not only prove his innocence, but will expose a conspiracy that reaches the highest levels of corporate America. Diana Chen appeared at the courthouse entrance, flanked by Titan's security team. Arrest them, she shouted. "There's a warrant." "Actually," Judge Thornton's voice boomed from speakers someone had set up. "There's no warrant. Mr. Hale has until 2 p.m. to appear, and by my watch, it's 1:47. Stand aside, Ms. Chen." The crowd pressed forward, and Chen's security detail found themselves vastly outnumbered. The legitimate courthouse security, seeing the judge's orders being defied, moved to create a path for Walter and Marcus. As they climbed the courthouse steps, Marcus felt the weight of hundreds of eyes on them. These people were risking their jobs, their livelihoods, to ensure he got his day in court. The responsibility was overwhelming. Inside courtroom 7B was packed beyond capacity. Judge Thornton had apparently approved standing room only, and every inch was filled. The jury box sat empty. This was still a preliminary hearing, but Marcus noticed federal marshals positioned strategically around the room. "Your Honor." Diana Chen stood immediately. "I object to this circus. Mr. Gibson has turned this into a media spectacle. Mr. Gibson has done nothing but arrive for court as instructed." Judge Thornton cut her off. "Now I believe we have matters to address regarding the evidence Mr. Gibson began presenting yesterday." Walter approached the bench. "Your Honor, before we proceed, I need to inform the court that approximately 1 hour ago, an attempt was made on my life. A man named Tommy Rodriguez was murdered in the courthouse parking garage by assassins who mistook him for me." Gasps rippled through the gallery. Diana Chen's face went white. "That's a very serious allegation, Mr. Gibson," the judge said carefully. "It's not an allegation, Your Honor. It's a fact." Walter produced his phone, projecting security footage onto the courtroom screen. The grainy video showed 2 men approaching a figure in a Gibson Cleaning Services uniform, raising weapons, firing without warning. The timestamp shows 6:47 a.m. The victim was found at 7:15 by courthouse security. "Your Honor," Robert Steele stood from his position at the back of the courtroom. "Titan Energy categorically denies any involvement." "Then you won't mind explaining this?" Walter interrupted, projecting a new image, a bank transfer record. $300,000 transferred from a Titan subsidiary to an account belonging to Marcus Webb, a known contract killer, at 11 p.m. last night. The memo line reads, "Sanitation Services." Rather on the nose, don't you think? The courtroom erupted. Judge Thornton hammered her gavel repeatedly. "Order Mr. Steele, Ms. Chen approach the bench immediately." As they conferred in heated whispers, Marcus watched Diana Chen's composure crumble. Her hands shook as she gestured wildly, obviously denying involvement. But the damage was done. "Your Honor." Walter raised his voice. "I move for immediate dismissal of all charges against Mr. Hale and request federal investigation into conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering, and corruption charges against Titan Energy Corporation, Diana Chen, Robert Steele, and Thomas Reynolds." "You can't prove," Steele began. "Actually, I can." Walter turned to the gallery. "Rebecca Gibson, please stand." Marcus turned to see Walter's daughter rise from her seat among the journalists. She looked just like her father, the same intelligent eyes, the same determined set to her jaw. "Your Honor, my daughter is an investigative journalist who has been independently investigating Titan Energy for 2 years. She has no connection to Mr. Hale's case and discovered her evidence separately. Rebecca." The young woman stepped forward, holding a tablet. "Your Honor, I have here recordings of Thomas Reynolds discussing the plan to frame Mr. Hale, dating back 18 months. I also have financial records showing systematic bribery of public officials, evidence of environmental crimes in 12 states, and proof that Titan Energy has been suppressing clean energy technology for over a decade." "Objection!" Diana Chen practically screamed. "This is ambush tactics. This evidence hasn't been properly submitted." "Actually?" Rebecca smiled. "I submitted it all to the FBI an hour ago. Special Agent Carver from the Public Corruption Unit should be arriving. Right about now." The courtroom doors opened, and a team of FBI agents entered, led by a stern-faced woman in her 40s. "Your Honor, I'm Special Agent Carver. We need to take several people into custody." What followed was orchestrated chaos. Diana Chen was arrested on conspiracy charges. Robert Steele tried to flee, but was stopped by the crowd of workers still gathered outside. Throughout it all, Walter stood calm at the defense table, methodically presenting document after document, building a case that was both devastating and irrefutable. "Your Honor," Walter said as the prosecutor's table sat empty. Diana Chen having been led away in handcuffs. "I believe the state no longer has a case against my client." Judge Thornton looked around the chaotic courtroom, then at the mountain of evidence Walter had presented. "Mr. Gibson, in my 30 years on the bench, I have never seen anything like this. The charges against Mr. Hale are dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, I'm recommending immediate investigation into prosecutorial misconduct and judicial corruption at the highest levels." The gavel came down, and the courtroom exploded in celebration. Marcus felt his knees go weak with relief. It was over. But Walter wasn't celebrating. His eyes were fixed on the entrance where Thomas Reynolds himself had just appeared. Reynolds was everything Marcus expected: silver-haired, immaculately dressed, radiating the confidence of a man who'd never faced consequences. He walked through the chaos as if it didn't exist, approaching the defense table. "Congratulations, Mr. Hale," Reynolds said smoothly. "You've won this round, but you should know that." Thomas Reynolds, Agent Carver, interrupted, appearing beside him. "You're under arrest for conspiracy, racketeering, murder for hire, and violations of the Sherman Antitrust Act." Reynolds laughed. "You can't be serious. Do you have any idea who I am? The connections I have?" "We know exactly who you are," Walter said, standing to face him. "And more importantly, we know what you've done. Every bribe, every threat, every life you've destroyed in the name of profit. It's all documented." Reynolds' smile faltered. "You're the janitor. Gibson, you're supposed to be dead." "Tommy Rodriguez is dead," Walter said quietly. "An innocent man with 3 kids. His blood is on your hands, Reynolds, and I'm going to make sure you pay for it." "You think you've won," Reynolds snarled as the handcuffs clicked around his wrists. "You have no idea what you've started. The people I work for, the real power, will abandon you the moment you become a liability," Marcus interrupted. "Which happened about 5 minutes ago, when your face appeared on every major news network being arrested for murder." As Reynolds was led away, still threatening and blustering, Walter finally allowed himself to sink into a chair. The adrenaline that had sustained him was fading, leaving exhaustion in its wake. "It's not over," he said quietly to Marcus. "Reynolds was right about one thing. He's just middle management. The real power structure is still intact." Marcus sat beside him, watching as the courtroom slowly emptied. "Then we keep fighting. With Project Aurora, we can break their monopoly on energy, create something they can't control or suppress." "You'll need protection," Walter said. "Security, legal support, people you can trust." "I'll need a general counsel," Marcus replied. "Someone who understands how these people operate. Someone who's already proven they can beat them." "Interested?" Walter looked at him in surprise. "You want me to be your general counsel? I've been a janitor for 15 years. "You've been preparing for 15 years, Marcus corrected. "There's a difference. Besides, you just took down one of the most powerful corporations in America with nothing but determination and cleaning supplies. Imagine what you could do with actual resources." Before Walter could respond, Rebecca approached them. "Dad," she said softly, then threw her arms around him. "I'm so proud of you." Marcus watched father and daughter reunite, feeling the weight of everything that had happened. In 24 hours, his entire world had changed. He'd gone from facing life in prison to freedom, from abandoned to defended, from alone to surrounded by allies he never knew he had. Jennifer Chen appeared, having slipped in during the chaos. "Mr. Hale, Mr. Gibson, you should see this." She held up her phone, showing a news report. "Titan Energy stock has crashed. Trading's been suspended. The board is calling an emergency meeting to remove Reynolds and cooperate with authorities." Good, Walter said, still holding his daughter. But that's just one company. There are dozens more, just like them, all working together to suppress innovation, maintain control, keep the world dependent on their products. Then we have work to do, Marcus said. Walter, I meant what I said. Join me. Not just as legal counsel, but as a partner. Help me build something that can't be corrupted or destroyed. Walter looked at Rebecca, who nodded encouragingly, then at Jennifer, who was smiling despite everything her sister had done, and finally at Marcus. All right, but we do this right. Complete transparency, no compromises, and we protect the people who help us. As they shook hands, sealing the partnership, Maria Rodriguez approached them. She'd been sitting in the gallery throughout the hearing, tears streaming down her face as justice was served for her husband's murder. Mr. Gibson, she said in accented English, Tommy always said you were a good man, that you looked out for people like us. Thank you for making sure his death meant something. Walter took her hands gently. Maria, I'm so sorry. Tommy was proud to work for you, she interrupted. He said you gave him dignity when the world tried to take it away. His children will know their father died a hero. As Maria walked away, supported by other workers from the crowd, Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders again. But this time, it was different. This time, he wasn't carrying it alone. We should go, Walter said, looking around the emptying courtroom. The media will want statements, and we need to control the narrative from here. They walked out together, the billionaire, the janitor-turned-lawyer, the journalist, and the whistleblower, into a crowd of reporters and supporters. The questions came in waves, but Walter handled them with the same calm competence he'd shown in court. Mr. Hale has been vindicated, he said clearly. The real criminals have been exposed. But this is just the beginning. The system that allowed this corruption to flourish is still in place. We're going to change that. How? A reporter called out. Marcus stepped forward. By making Project Aurora a reality. By proving that clean, affordable energy isn't just possible, it's inevitable. And by ensuring that no corporation can ever again use the legal system as a weapon against innovation and progress. As they pushed through the crowd toward a waiting car, not Walter's van this time, but a proper security vehicle Marcus had arranged. Walter's phone rang. He looked at the screen and frowned. Unknown number, he said. Don't answer it, Marcus warned. But Walter, ever the investigator, put it on speaker. A distorted voice spoke. You think you've won, but you've only scratched the surface. Titan was expendable. The real players remain hidden. Stop now, or everyone you care about will pay the price. The line went dead. In the car, silence reigned for a moment. Empty threats, Jennifer said, but her voice shook slightly. No, Walter said quietly. That's the council. Marcus turned to him sharply. The council. Urban legend among corporate lawyers. Supposedly the real power brokers, people who make Reynolds look like a small-time crook. Old money, old power connections going back generations. If they're real and they're threatened by what we've done today, then we've got their attention, Marcus finished. Good. Let them come. We'll be ready. As the car pulled away from the courthouse, Walter looked back at the building where he'd spent 15 years in obscurity preparing for this moment. The afternoon sun caught the windows, turning them golden, and for a moment the scales of justice carved above the entrance seemed to gleam with new purpose. The secure facility Marcus had arranged was a fortress of glass and steel on the Upper East Side, complete with bulletproof windows and a security team that had once protected heads of state. But as Walter stood in the war room they'd established on the 40th floor, surrounded by screens showing news feeds from around the world, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were still exposed, still vulnerable. The council doesn't make empty threats, he said to Marcus, who was reviewing the flood of messages from investors and board members trying to distance themselves from the Titan energy scandal. If they're real, and they've decided we're a problem, we need to be prepared for something beyond conventional attacks. Rebecca had set up her own workstation in the corner, her fingers flying across multiple keyboards as she traced financial connections through shell companies and offshore accounts. "Dad, I'm finding something strange. Every major energy company that competed with Titan has had key personnel die or disappear over the past 20 years. Heart attacks, car accidents, suicides that don't add up. They eliminate competition before it becomes a threat," Marcus said, looking up from his tablet. "But we're past that point now. We're already a threat." Jennifer entered the room carrying a box of files she'd managed to retrieve from her sister's apartment before the FBI sealed it. Diana kept records of everything. She was paranoid about Reynolds betraying her, so she documented every meeting, every payment, every order. She pulled out a leather journal, including this: references to something called the Prometheus Protocol. Walter took the journal, scanning Diana's meticulous notes. His face grew increasingly grim as he read. "It's a systematic plan to control global energy distribution for the next century. They're not just suppressing clean technology, they're actively working to increase dependence on their infrastructure. Wars, political upheavals, environmental disasters. They're engineering them all to maintain control." "That's insane," Jennifer said. "No one could coordinate something that massive." "Unless they've been doing it for generations," Rebecca interjected, pulling up historical data on her screens. "Look at this pattern. Every major energy crisis in the past 50 years preceded a consolidation of power in the industry. Every breakthrough in alternative energy corresponded with a war or economic collapse that made implementation impossible." Marcus stood pacing to the window that overlooked Central Park. "Then Project Aurora isn't just threatening their profits. It's threatening their entire system of control." The phone in the center of the table rang. They'd set up a single, untraceable line for secure communications. Walter answered on speaker. "Mr. Gibson." The voice was elderly, cultured with a slight European accent. "My name is Aldrich Brennan. I represent certain interests that have become concerned about recent events." "The Council," Walter said flatly. "Such dramatic names you give things." Brennan chuckled. "We prefer to think of ourselves as stewards of stability. The world economy depends on predictable energy markets, Mr. Gibson. What Mr. Hale proposes would create chaos." "What he proposes would create freedom," Walter countered. "Freedom from artificial scarcity, from manufactured dependence, from your control." "Control is such an ugly word. We prefer guidance. The masses need guidance, Mr. Gibson. Without it, civilization collapses. We've prevented more wars than you can imagine simply by maintaining the balance." Marcus moved closer to the phone. "By keeping billions in poverty, by destroying the environment for profit. Acceptable losses for the greater good. But I didn't call to debate philosophy. I called to make an offer. Mr. Hale, sell us Project Aurora. Name your price. 50 billion, 100, will make you the richest man in history. You can pursue any other venture you choose, just not this one." "Not interested," Marcus said immediately. "Then perhaps Mr. Gibson would be interested in our alternative offer." Brennan continued smoothly. "We can restore your reputation completely. Your old law firm rebuilt and funded beyond your wildest dreams. Your daughter's career guaranteed to reach whatever heights she desires. Even resurrection in a way we can make it, as if the last 15 years never happened." Walter's jaw clenched. "You mean, make it as if Tommy Rodriguez never died, as if all the people you've destroyed never existed?" "Casualties of war, Mr. Gibson. But the war can end today. All you have to do is convince Mr. Hale to be reasonable." "Here's my counteroffer," Walter said, his voice hard as granite. "You and your stewards step aside. Let progress happen. Let humanity evolve beyond your control. Or we expose everything, every crime, every conspiracy, every murder you've orchestrated." Silence stretched for long moments. When Brennan spoke again, his cultured voice had turned cold. "You have no idea what forces you're challenging. We've toppled governments for less. But very well. You've chosen war. Remember that what happens next is on your heads." The line went dead. Cheerful fellow, Rebecca said dryly, but Walter could see the fear in her eyes. Before anyone could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the building. The security chief's voice crackled over the intercom. "We have a breach. Multiple hostiles entering from the parking garage and the roof simultaneously." Walter moved with surprising speed for his age, pulling a pistol from a concealed holster, something he'd started carrying after Tommy's death. "They're not wasting time. Marcus, get to the safe room. Rebecca, Jennifer with him." "I'm not hiding while you," Marcus began. "You're the target," Walter interrupted. "Without you, Project Aurora dies. Move." The lights cut out, plunging them into darkness before emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red. Through the windows they could see helicopters approaching black against the night sky. "Those aren't news choppers," Rebecca said. Glass shattered as smoke grenades flew through the windows. Walter pushed everyone toward the emergency exit, but armed figures in tactical gear were already emerging from the stairwell. Not regular mercenaries, these moved with military precision, their faces hidden behind night vision goggles. "Nobody has to die tonight," the lead operative said, his weapon trained on Marcus. "Mr. Hale comes with us, everyone else walks away." "Like Tommy Rodriguez walked away?" Walter asked, shifting to put himself between the gunman and Marcus. "That was unfortunate. Mistaken identity. But this doesn't have to end the same way." Walter saw movement in his peripheral vision, more operatives rappelling down from the roof. They were surrounded. But he also saw something else. Jennifer had her hand in her purse, gripping something. "You know what your problem is," Walter said. "Buying time. You think power comes from fear, from force. But real power comes from truth. And the truth is already out there, spreading faster than you can contain it." The operative's finger moved to his trigger. "Philosophy won't stop bullets, old man." "No," Jennifer said, suddenly pulling a device from her purse. "But this might." She pressed a button, and every screen in the room, every phone, every electronic device suddenly blazed to life, broadcasting at maximum volume. It was a live feed, multiple feeds actually showing their current situation from various angles. The security cameras Walter had insisted on installing weren't just recording. They were streaming directly to news outlets worldwide. "Smile," Rebecca said to the operatives. "You're on global television. The whole world is watching armed men attack Marcus Hale. Still want to pull that trigger?" The lead operative hesitated, his hand moving to his earpiece as he received new orders. In that moment of uncertainty, the real FBI arrived, not the corrupted agents on the council's payroll, but a tactical team led by Agent Carver herself. Federal agents, weapons down now. The ensuing chaos was brief but intense. Some operatives tried to flee, others surrendered immediately. The lead operative made a break for the window, firing a zipline, but Walter's shot caught him in the shoulder, sending him tumbling to the ground where agents quickly subdued him. As the smoke cleared and the lights flickered back on, Agent Carver surveyed the scene with grim satisfaction. "Mr. Hale, Mr. Gibson, are you all right?" "We're fine," Marcus said, though his hands were shaking. "How did you—" "Ms. Chen here sent us an emergency alert with your location the moment the call ended. We were already mobilizing when the live feed started. The council, or whoever they are, just made a very public mistake." Walter looked at Jennifer with new respect. "The device." "Something I've been working on," she said modestly. "After what happened to Diana, I figured we might need a nuclear option. Instant worldwide broadcast using emergency communication protocols. They can't kill us if the whole world is watching." Over the next several hours, as federal agents processed the scene and took statements, the implications of what had happened rippled outward. The footage of armed mercenaries attacking Marcus Hale to suppress clean energy technology spread across social media like wildfire. Hashtags like #ProjectAurora and #EnergyFreedom began trending globally. Protests erupted outside energy company headquarters from London to Tokyo. "We've changed the game," Rebecca said, monitoring the social media explosion. They can't operate in the shadows anymore. But Walter wasn't celebrating. He stood at the shattered window looking out at the city lights below. They'll adapt. They always do. This was just their first move testing our defenses. Marcus joined him. Then we need to move faster. Get Project Aurora into production before they can regroup. That'll take months, maybe years, Walter said. They won't give us that time. Unless we force their hand, Jennifer said suddenly. Everyone turned to her. My sister's journal mentions emergency protocols. If the council feels truly threatened, they have a meeting. All of them in person to decide on extreme measures. A gathering of all the shadow puppeteers in one place, Walter mused. That's either our best opportunity or a trap. It's both, Marcus said. But it might be our only chance to end this definitively. Agent Carver, who had been listening from the doorway, stepped forward. If you're thinking what I think you're thinking, you're talking about one of the most dangerous operations imaginable. These people have resources we can't even fathom. But they also have something else, Walter said. Hubris. They've operated with impunity for so long, they can't imagine actually losing. Rebecca pulled up financial data on her screens. I've been tracking unusual activity since the attack. Private jets converging on a single location, Switzerland. A resort in the Alps that's been completely bought out for a private corporate retreat. That's it, Jennifer breathed. Diana mentioned it once when she was drunk. The Olympus Summit, where the gods meet to decide the fate of mortals. Walter turned to Agent Carver. How much support can you give us? Officially none. This is outside FBI jurisdiction. She paused. Unofficially, I know people in Interpol who've been tracking these shadows for years. People who've lost colleagues to mysterious accidents, who've watched investigations get buried. They might be interested in a chance to finally strike back. Marcus was already on his phone calling in favors from his remaining allies. I can get us resources, transportation, whatever we need. But Walter, this is beyond dangerous. These people have probably killed hundreds to protect their interests. Then it's time someone stood up to them, Walter said firmly. But we do this smart. We need evidence not just of their crimes, but of their structure, their plans, everything. We need to expose the entire network so thoroughly that no amount of money or influence can hide it. Over the next 48 hours, they assembled a team. Not soldiers or spies, but people like them, individuals who'd been wronged by the shadow system and had the skills to fight back. A hacker collective that had been tracking dark money for years. Former intelligence officers who'd been burned for asking too many questions. Journalists who'd had stories killed and careers destroyed for getting too close to the truth. Jennifer worked on penetrating the resort's security systems, using her sister's old codes and connections. Rebecca coordinated with journalists worldwide preparing for a synchronized information release that would make WikiLeaks look like a local newspaper. Marcus liquidated assets, converting his wealth into untraceable resources they could use without triggering alerts. And Walter planned. Every detail, every contingency, every possible outcome. He studied the resort's layout, the surrounding terrain, local law enforcement response times. But more importantly, he studied the enemy, their psychology, their patterns, their weaknesses. They're old, he told the assembled team on the eve of their departure. Old money, old thinking, old methods. They still believe in hierarchy and control through fear and tradition. They can't conceive of a coordinated grassroots assault because in their world, nothing significant happens without someone at the top ordering it. So we hit them from every direction at once, Rebecca said, understanding. No clear leadership, no single point of failure. Exactly. They'll be looking for a commander to negotiate with or eliminate. Instead, they'll face a hydra. The night before they left for Switzerland, Walter found Marcus standing in what remained of their war room staring at the plans for Project Aurora. Having second thoughts, Walter asked. No. Just thinking about Tommy Rodriguez. He died for this, and he didn't even know what this was. He was just doing his job. That's where you're wrong, Walter said. Tommy knew exactly what this was. Every working person knows instinctively that the system is rigged against them. They might not know the details, might not see the puppet strings, but they feel them. Tommy died fighting for the same thing we're fighting for, a chance for regular people to live without invisible chains. Marcus nodded slowly. When this is over, if we succeed, I want to set up a foundation in his name. Full scholarships for his kids, support for his widow, and funding for families who've lost someone to corporate violence. When we succeed, Walter corrected, not if. As they prepared to leave, Walter's phone rang one last time. The same elderly voice, but now with an edge of desperation barely concealed beneath cultured tones. Mr. Gibson, this is your last chance. What you're planning is suicide. Even if you expose us, others will take our place. The system is bigger than any group of individuals. Maybe, Walter said. But every system can be broken if you know where to apply pressure. And thanks to your attack, the whole world is watching. You can't disappear us without creating martyrs. You can't discredit us without validating our claims. You've lost control of the narrative, Brennan. You think you're heroes. Brennan spat, his composure finally cracking. But heroes die, Gibson. They always die. Sometimes, Walter agreed. But their ideas don't. And that's what terrifies you, isn't it? Not Marcus, not me, not any individual. You're terrified that the idea is out there, now that people don't need you, don't need your system, don't need to live in artificial scarcity while you hoard abundance. You'll destroy civilization. No, we'll free it to become something you can't control, something better. He hung up without waiting for a response. The team departed in small groups, taking different routes to avoid detection. Walter and Marcus traveled with false identities provided by their hacker allies, just two businessmen heading to Switzerland for a winter holiday. Rebecca and Jennifer took a more circuitous route through Eastern Europe, their journalist credentials providing cover. As their plane lifted off from JFK Airport, Walter allowed himself a moment of reflection. 15 years ago, he'd lost everything to these shadows. He'd been broken, reduced to invisibility, forced to watch from the margins as they continued their predations. But that invisibility had become his strength, his years of observation, his weapon. You know, we might not come back from this, Marcus said quietly, seated beside him. I know. But that's not what matters. What matters is that the truth gets out, that Project Aurora gets released to the world, that the system breaks. And if it doesn't, if they're right and new shadows just replace the old ones. Walter looked out the window at the clouds below, thinking of Tommy, of Rebecca, of all the invisible people who kept the world running while others claimed the credit and the profit. Then at least we tried, and at least we stood up and said enough. Sometimes that's all you can do, refuse to be complicit in your own oppression. Below them the Atlantic stretched out dark and vast, but ahead the first light of dawn was breaking on the horizon. Walter closed his eyes, running through the plan one more time. In less than 24 hours, they would either expose the greatest conspiracy in human history or become its latest victims. But for now, in this moment suspended between earth and sky, between night and day, between the old world and whatever came next, Walter Gibson allowed himself something he hadn't felt in 15 years. Hope. The plane flew on through the darkness, carrying them toward a confrontation that would determine not just their own fates, but the future of human progress itself. And in the cargo hold below, carefully packed and protected, were the complete plans for Project Aurora, ready to be released to the world the moment their signal went out. The revolution wouldn't be televised. It would be live-streamed, uploaded, shared, and impossible to stop. The janitor who'd spent 15 years cleaning up after the powerful was about to make the biggest mess of their lives. The Swiss Alps rose like frozen titans against the morning sky as Walter's team converged on the small village of Zermatt. The Olympus Resort sat perched on a private peak, accessible only by a single cable car system that had been suspiciously closed for maintenance 3 days ago. Through his binoculars, Walter could see security checkpoints at every approach, men with earpieces and barely concealed weapons patrolling the perimeter. They're not even trying to hide anymore, Rebecca observed from their rented chalet's window. She'd arrived 6 hours earlier with Jennifer, and they'd already mapped out the electronic security grid. 47 private jets at the airfield security teams from at least 12 different private military companies. It's like they're daring the world to notice. Marcus stood over a topographical map spread across the dining table. Maybe that's the point. Show of force. Remind everyone who really runs things. Or they're scared. Jennifer suggested, her laptop showing streams of intercepted communications. The chatter I'm picking up isn't confident. They're arguing among themselves, some wanting to negotiate, others pushing for extreme measures. Walter studied the photographs Rebecca had taken of arriving attendees. Old faces lined with privilege and power, names that never appeared in Forbes, but controlled more wealth than most nations. Fear makes them dangerous. A cornered animal attacks blindly. His secure phone buzzed. Agent Carver's voice was tense. "We have a problem. Someone leaked your location to Interpol, but not to help. There's a kill order out. Official classification: international terrorists planning to attack a legitimate business gathering." "They're covering their bases," Walter said calmly. "If we fail, they write the history. We're dead terrorists who tried to attack innocent businessmen." "I can try to delay the response, but you have maybe 6 hours before tactical teams arrive." 6 hours, Walter repeated. "Then we move now." He gathered the team around the table. Besides their core group, they'd been joined by a dozen specialists, hackers, former military investigative journalists who'd spent years tracking these shadows. Each person there had lost something to the Council's machinations. "Change of plans," Walter announced. "We don't have time for subtle infiltration. We go loud, we go fast, and we get everything transmitted before they can stop us." "That's suicide," one of the former military operators said. "They have high ground superior numbers and defensive positions." "They also have something else." Walter pulled out a tablet showing architectural plans. "Hubris. This resort was built as a luxury retreat, not a fortress. The security they've added is impressive, but improvised. And they have a critical weakness." He pointed to a section of the blueprint. "The old mining tunnels. This whole mountain is hollow, carved out in the 1800s for copper mining. The resort was built on top of the abandoned mine. They've secured every modern entrance, but these tunnels, they probably don't even know they exist." Rebecca finished understanding. "Dad, you beautiful genius." Walter allowed himself a small smile. "Jennifer, can you kill their communications? Complete blackout. Give me 30 minutes and the right position. They're using a satellite uplink with cellular backup. I can create a dead zone, but once I do, they'll know something's wrong. Then we time it perfectly." Walter looked at each person in the room. "This is it. Last chance to walk away." No one moved. The entrance to the old mining tunnel was hidden beneath a condemned equipment shed 2 kilometers from the resort. The wooden boards covering it had been replaced recently, too recently. Walter ran his fingers along the edges, finding the concealed hinges. "They do know about it," Marcus whispered. "But they're using it for something else." Walter replied, noticing fresh tire tracks leading inside. "Emergency exit probably, which means—" They descended into darkness, flashlights cutting through the black. The tunnel was reinforced with modern supports, and cables ran along the walls, power and data lines feeding up to the resort. Jennifer immediately went to work attaching her devices to the cables. "I'm in their system," she whispered, her face illuminated by her laptop screen. "Give me 5 minutes to map everything." They moved deeper, the tunnel gradually ascending toward the resort's foundation. They could hear voices now echoing from above, hundreds of people gathered in what sounded like a massive chamber. "The main ballroom." Rebecca checked the plans. "It's directly above us." Through a grate in the tunnel ceiling, they could see into a service area beneath the ballroom stage. Walter carefully pushed the grate aside and pulled himself up, followed by the others. They were in a storage room filled with catering equipment. Through the door they could hear someone speaking, amplified by a microphone. The situation requires unprecedented response. Mr. Hale and his conspirators have declared war on the established order. Walter recognized Brennan's voice. The question before us is simple. Do we negotiate, or do we eliminate the threat entirely? Multiple voices rose in response, arguing. Through a crack in the door, Walter could see the ballroom, a sea of expensive suits and hardened faces, the shadow parliament of global power debating his fate. Eliminating Hale won't stop the technology, someone argued. It's already been distributed. The plans are out there. Then we discredit it, another voice suggested. Fake disasters, blame them on Aurora technology. Make the public afraid of it. Or, Brennan said, raising his hand for silence, we accelerate the Prometheus protocol. Complete economic collapse within 6 months. In the chaos, we consolidate everything. When we rebuild, we ensure technology like Aurora is regulated out of existence. Marcus gripped Walter's shoulder, his face pale. They're talking about destroying the global economy. Hundreds of millions would suffer. Someone in the crowd protested. The human cost has never been a concern. Brennan cut them off. We've caused famines to control populations, wars to redirect resources. This would be larger in scale, but no different in principle. Walter had heard enough. He nodded to Jennifer, who began the communication blackout. Within seconds, confused voices rose as phones went dead and laptops lost connection. Ladies and gentlemen, Walter's voice boomed as he stepped onto the stage, Marcus beside him. Please remain calm. This is not an attack. This is an intervention. The room erupted in chaos. Security moved toward the stage but stopped as the rest of Walter's team emerged from various entrances, weapons drawn but not aimed. It wasn't about violence. It was about controlling the room. Who the hell do you think you are? Brennan stood, his aged face flushed with anger. I'm the janitor, Mr. Brennan, the invisible man who's been cleaning up after you for 15 years. And today, I'm here to take out the trash. Rebecca appeared on stage with broadcasting equipment. We're live in 30 seconds. Every major news outlet, every social media platform, every government intelligence service will be watching. You're broadcasting nothing, Brennan smirked. We control the infrastructure you think you control, Jennifer interrupted, is now ours. Your entire network, every secret server, every encrypted file, it's all being uploaded as we speak. On-cue screens around the ballroom flickered to life, showing documents, bank transfers, recorded conversations, decades of evidence scrolling past in an endless stream. The Prometheus protocol, Walter announced to the camera. Rebecca had pointed at him, is a plan by this group to intentionally collapse the world economy to maintain their control over energy resources. The documentation is being released globally as I speak. You don't understand what you're doing. An elderly woman stood, her voice shaking. Without our guidance, without controlled distribution of resources, billions will die. Billions are dying now. Marcus stepped forward. From poverty, from pollution, from wars you orchestrate. Project Aurora can end that, provide unlimited clean energy to everyone. And destroy the economic foundations of civilization, another member shouted. Your civilization, Walter corrected. Built on scarcity, you maintain artificially suffering, you cause deliberately progress, you suppress systematically. Brennan pulled out an antique pistol from his jacket. Enough. You think you're heroes. You're children playing with forces beyond your comprehension. Before he could aim, a shot rang out, not from Walter's team, but from within the crowd of council members. A younger man, perhaps 50, held a smoking gun. Brennan's weapon fallen from his lifeless hand. I've had enough, the shooter said, his voice breaking. My daughter died in the Jakarta floods last year. Floods we caused by suppressing climate adaptation technology. I joined you for power, for wealth, but not for this. Not for genocide disguised as economics. The room fell silent, except for the hum of broadcasting equipment. Then, one by one, others began to speak. Confessions poured out, some defiant, some remorseful, all damning. The camera captured everything, broadcasting the unraveling of the shadow government to billions of witnesses worldwide. But Walter noticed movement in his peripheral vision. Security teams were regrouping, receiving orders through hardwired communications Jennifer couldn't jam. The head of security, a scarred man with dead eyes, was organizing a counter-assault. "Marcus, get to the mining tunnel," Walter ordered. "Upload Aurora now while we have the connection. I'm not leaving you." This was always the plan. One of us had to survive to ensure Aurora got released. Go. As Marcus reluctantly retreated with Jennifer and 2 guards, Walter faced the deteriorating situation. Some council members were trying to flee, others were turning on each other, and the security forces were moving in. "Mr. Gibson," the scarred security chief called out, "you've made your point. Stand down, and you might survive this." "Survive to be hunted for the rest of my short life? I think not." The lights suddenly cut out. In the darkness, chaos erupted. Gunfire screams, the crash of overturning furniture. Walter dropped to the floor, crawling toward Rebecca's position. Emergency lighting kicked in, revealing a battlefield. Security forces were engaging Walter's team, but also fighting among themselves. Some had apparently decided to switch sides. Through the melee, Walter saw the younger man who'd shot Brennan approaching, hands raised. "I can help. I know their contingency plans, their backup locations. Everything." "Why should I trust you?" "Because I'm dead either way. At least this way my death means something." Before Walter could respond, an explosion rocked the building. Part of the ceiling collapsed, and through the hole, Walter could see military helicopters approaching, not the local authorities, but unmarked black aircraft. "The council's private army," the man explained. "They'll kill everyone here, blame it on terrorists, and rebuild from the ashes. Then we need to get out. Now." Walter's team began a fighting retreat toward the mining tunnels. Rebecca continued broadcasting, even as they moved her camera, capturing the council's own forces attacking the resort. The world was watching a shadow war become visible, unable to look away from the horrific spectacle. In the tunnels, they found Marcus at a computer terminal. Jennifer had set up, uploading the final components of Project Aurora to thousands of servers worldwide. 90% complete, he reported. 3 more minutes. "We don't have 3 minutes, Walter said, as explosions echoed closer. The council's forces were in the tunnels, now advancing systematically. Walter's team set up defensive positions, but they were outgunned and outnumbered. "Dad," Rebecca said quietly, her camera still rolling. "We're not getting out of this, are we?" Walter pulled his daughter close. "The truth is out. Aurora is almost uploaded. We've won regardless of what happens to us." "Such melodrama!" A familiar voice echoed through the tunnel. They turned to see Thomas Reynolds alive, despite his supposed arrest, flanked by mercenaries. "Did you really think we'd let ourselves be taken by the FBI body doubles, Mr. Gibson? We've been using them for decades." Reynolds raised his weapon. "You've caused us considerable inconvenience. But in the end, you're just a janitor who got above his station." "Maybe," Walter said, standing straight despite the guns pointed at him. "But this janitor just exposed your entire organization to the world. This janitor just released technology that will revolutionize human civilization. This janitor just proved that even shadows can't survive in the light." "Upload complete," Marcus shouted. Reynolds' face contorted with rage. "Kill them all!" But before anyone could fire, the tunnel filled with smoke. Not gas grenades, but something else. A thick, obscuring cloud that seemed to move with purpose. Through the haze, Walter heard a familiar voice. "Federal agents, weapons down!" Agent Carver emerged from the smoke with a full FBI tactical team, but more importantly, with camera crews from major news networks. The entire scene was being broadcast live. "Thomas Reynolds," Carver announced loudly, clearly for the cameras. "You're under arrest for conspiracy, murder, terrorism, and crimes against humanity." Reynolds looked around wildly, calculating. He was surrounded on live television with nowhere to run. His mercenaries were already dropping their weapons, unwilling to engage federal agents on camera. "This isn't over," Reynolds snarled as handcuffs clicked around his wrists. "You think you've won? We have resources you can't imagine, connections in every government. We'll be free within days." Actually, the younger council member who'd helped them stepped forward. "You won't. I've been cooperating with international authorities for the past 6 months. Every account, every safe house, every corrupted official, it's all been documented and acted upon. As we speak, coordinated arrests are happening in 43 countries. Reynolds's face went white. You're nobody. A junior member who was perfectly positioned to see everything while being ignored, the man replied. Rather like Mr. Gibson here. You taught us too well the invisible are the most dangerous. As Reynolds and his forces were led away, Walter felt the adrenaline finally leaving his system. He slumped against the tunnel wall, exhausted beyond measure. Rebecca knelt beside him, still filming, but with tears in her eyes. It's over, Dad. You did it. We did it, Walter corrected, looking at Marcus, Jennifer, and the surviving members of their team. All of us, even Tommy Rodriguez, especially Tommy. Marcus approached with a laptop showing news feeds from around the world. Governments were announcing investigations into their energy sectors. Scientists were already downloading Aurora plans, confirming their validity. Stock markets were in chaos, but a different kind, the panic selling of old energy stocks and the surge of anything related to clean technology. It's happening, Marcus said in wonder. The whole system is unraveling. And rebuilding, Walter added. That's the important part. It's not enough to tear down. We have to help build something better. Over the next hours, as they were debriefed by legitimate authorities and examined by medical teams, the full scope of what they'd accomplished became clear. The council's exposure had triggered a cascade of revelations. Government officials were resigning in disgrace. Corporate executives were fleeing to non-extradition countries. Whistleblowers were coming forward with additional evidence. But more importantly, Project Aurora was spreading. Within 6 hours, 12 countries had announced crash programs to implement the technology. Universities were opening their labs to anyone wanting to help develop it. Open-source communities were already improving on Marcus's designs. You realize what you've done? Agent Carver asked Walter as they sat in a Swiss police station giving statements. You've potentially triggered the biggest economic and social transformation in human history. Someone had to, Walter replied simply. For 15 years, I watched them destroy lives for profit. I watched them suppress progress for control. Someone had to say enough. But why you? Why a janitor? Walter smiled, thinking of all the invisible people who'd helped along the way, the security guards who'd looked the other way, the secretaries who'd leaked documents, the maintenance workers who'd provided access. Because janitors see everything, but are seen by no one. We clean up the messes, so we know where all the dirt is. And sometimes, just sometimes, we get tired of cleaning up after the same people making the same messes. Jennifer approached with a phone. Mr. Gibson, you need to see this. The screen showed a live feed from the Manhattan courthouse, where this had all begun. Thousands of people had gathered, not protesting, but celebrating. They were holding signs with Tommy Rodriguez's picture with Walter's name, with Project Aurora equals freedom, written in dozens of languages. And at the front of the crowd, Maria Rodriguez stood with her children speaking to reporters. My husband died because he wore a uniform that made him invisible to powerful people. But Walter Gibson saw him, remembered him, made sure his death meant something. Today, no one is invisible. Walter felt tears he hadn't allowed himself in 15 years finally fall. Rebecca hugged him tightly, and even Marcus, despite his usual composure, wiped at his eyes. What now? Marcus asked. The technology is out there, the council is broken, but there's so much work to be done. Now we build, Walter said. We take Aurora global. We help communities implement it. We make sure it can't be controlled or suppressed again. And the legal battles, Jennifer added. There'll be thousands of cases as the old system tries to reassert control. Then we fight them. Walter stood some of his old energy returning. But this time we fight in the light. No more shadows, no more secret deals. Everything transparent, everything public. His phone rang. Judge Thornton's name appeared on the screen. "Mr. Gibson." Her voice was warm, proud even. "I wanted you to know that the New York Bar Association has just voted unanimously to formally recognize your years of unofficial practice. They're also establishing the Walter Gibson Legal Aid Foundation, funded by seized council assets, to provide free representation to victims of corporate malfeasance." I don't know what to say. Say you'll run it. Say you'll teach the next generation of lawyers that justice isn't about power or prestige, but about service, about seeing the invisible and giving them voice. Walter looked at his daughter, at Marcus, at Jennifer, all nodding encouragingly. "I'll do it. But on one condition." "Name it." "The Foundation's first memorial scholarship goes to Tommy Rodriguez's children. Full ride through law school if they want it." "Already approved. Mr. Gibson." "Walter, what you've done today will be studied for generations. You've proven that one person, no matter how humble their position, can change the world." "Not one person," Walter corrected. "One person who remembered he wasn't alone. Who remembered that the invisible are only powerless if they stay invisible." As the sun set over the Swiss Alps, painting the snow-covered peaks in shades of gold and crimson, Walter stood with his makeshift family, the billionaire who'd risked everything, the whistleblower who'd betrayed her own sister for justice, the journalist who'd never stopped searching for truth, and the team of invisibles who'd stood up to shadows. The war wasn't over. The old powers would regroup, new challenges would emerge, and the transformation of global energy infrastructure would take years, maybe decades. But for today, for this moment, they'd won something precious, proof that the system could be beaten, that shadows could be banished, that the invisible could rise. Walter's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. He almost deleted it, then noticed it was a photo. Tommy Rodriguez from years ago, standing proud in his Gibson Cleaning Services uniform. His children beside him at some company picnic Walter barely remembered. The caption read, "Thank you for remembering him. Thank you for seeing us. Every invisible person in the world." Walter saved the photo, then looked up at the darkening sky. Somewhere up there, among the first emerging stars, satellites were beaming Project Aurora's specifications to every corner of the globe. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. But tonight, they'd earned a moment of peace. "Come on," he said to the others. "Let's go home. We have a world to rebuild." As they walked toward the waiting vehicles that would take them to the airport, Walter noticed something different. The service workers in the police station, the cleaning staff at the hotel, the drivers and guards, and countless invisible people who kept the world running, they were all looking at him. Not with deference or fear, but with recognition. One person to another visible at last. The janitor had done his job. He'd cleaned up the biggest mess of all. Now it was time to make sure it stayed clean. 6 months had passed since the Swiss revelations, and Walter Gibson stood in what had once been an abandoned warehouse in Queens, now transformed into the headquarters of the Gibson Legal Justice Foundation. The morning sun streamed through newly installed windows, illuminating rows of desks where young lawyers worked alongside seasoned veterans, all united in their mission to defend those the system had forgotten. "Mr. Gibson," a young associate approached with a stack of files. "We've got 17 new cases from the Detroit Aurora implementation. Energy companies are trying to sue homeowners for theft of service because they're generating their own power." Walter took the files, scanning them quickly. The old guard was fighting back with every legal trick they could muster, trying to strangle Project Aurora in red tape and litigation. "Set up a team meeting for this afternoon. We'll file a class action countersuit. If they want to fight, we'll give them one." His phone rang. Marcus's name appeared on the screen. "Walter, we have a problem. A big one." The urgency in Marcus's voice made Walter's blood run cold. What's happened? Remember the council member who helped us? The one who shot Brennan? He's dead. They found him in his cell this morning. Official cause is suicide, but Walter, he was in solitary confinement under 24-hour surveillance. Walter felt the familiar chill of danger returning. They'd been naive to think it was over, that exposing the council would end their influence. Hydra-like cutting off the head had only revealed how deep the body extended. There's more, Marcus continued. Jennifer intercepted communications. There's something called the Phoenix Initiative. The council's remnants are regrouping under new leadership. Someone calling themselves Prometheus. Where's Jennifer now? Safe house in Brooklyn. She says she needs to show us something in person, something she can't risk transmitting. Within an hour, Walter found himself in an unremarkable apartment in Bay Ridge, surrounded by the familiar faces of their core team. Jennifer looked haggard, dark circles under her eyes, testament to sleepless nights spent monitoring dark web channels. They never stopped, she said without preamble, pulling up encrypted files on her laptop. While we were celebrating thinking we'd won, they were adapting. The Phoenix Initiative isn't about suppressing Aurora anymore, it's about controlling it. She showed them patent filings, corporate registrations, legislative proposals. They're creating a new monopoly. Since they can't stop Aurora, they're trying to become the exclusive manufacturers and distributors. They're buying up rare earth mineral rights, essential for the components, lobbying for regulations that only they can afford to meet. Rebecca, who'd been investigating independently, added her findings. I've tracked suspicious deaths in 12 countries, all scientists or engineers who were developing improvements to Aurora technology. Each one ruled accidental or suicide. They're eliminating competition, Walter said grimly. If they can't control the technology directly, they'll control who can build it. Marcus slammed his fist on the table. We released Aurora as open source specifically to prevent this. Open source doesn't matter if they control the supply chain, Jennifer replied. They've learned from our victory. Instead of operating in shadows, they're using legitimate business practices. Hostile takeovers, patent trolling, regulatory capture. All perfectly legal. A knock at the door made everyone freeze. Walter moved cautiously to the security monitor, then relaxed slightly. It was Agent Carver, but her expression was grim. We need to talk, she said as Walter let her in. The FBI has been ordered to cease all investigations into former council members. Word from the top is that pursuing them further would destabilize economic recovery. I've been specifically instructed to stop cooperating with you. Let me guess, Walter said. Prometheus has people in the administration. Higher than that, there are rumors of a shadow cabinet unelected advisors who actually make policy. And Walter, they've put out a contract on you, not a killing, something worse. They want you discredited, broken, turned into an example of what happens to those who challenge them. She handed him a folder. Inside were fabricated documents, expertly crafted evidence of embezzlement from the Foundation. Falsified testimonies claiming Walter had coerced witnesses during the council exposure, even digitally manipulated photographs suggesting inappropriate relationships with clients. This is just what I've intercepted. They're planning to release it all simultaneously across multiple platforms, making it impossible to refute before the damage is done. Walter studied the documents with professional admiration. This is good work. If I didn't know better, I'd believe it myself. Dad, we need to run, Rebecca said. Disappear before they launch this. No. Walter's voice was firm. Running means they win. It means everyone who stood with us becomes a target. We face this head on. How? Marcus asked. They've learned from last time. They won't make the same mistakes. Walter moved to the window, looking out at the city below. Ordinary people going about their lives unaware that the war for their future was still being fought in rooms like this. We turned their strength against them last time, he said slowly. Their secrecy became their weakness when we exposed it. Now they're using legitimacy as armor. So we make legitimacy our weapon. He turned back to the group. Jennifer, can you trace the Phoenix Initiative's financial structure? Already working on it. They're using shell companies layered like an onion, but every transaction leaves a trail. Rebecca, I need you to contact every journalist who covered the original story. Tell them we're about to give them the sequel. Marcus, how quickly can you mobilize the Aurora community? Everyone who's built devices, implemented the technology, benefited from it. Marcus was already on his phone. Give me 12 hours. I can have 10,000 people ready to act. Agent Carver. Walter turned to the FBI agent. I know you've been ordered to stop helping us. But if evidence of crimes just happened to become public, you'd have to investigate, wouldn't you? She smiled slightly. I couldn't ignore evidence that appeared in public domain. That would be dereliction of duty. Then we give them what they gave us, a fight on multiple fronts, too many to counter simultaneously. Over the next week, Walter orchestrated a campaign that turned the Phoenix Initiative's strengths into vulnerabilities. Jennifer traced their financial networks, finding the weak points where legitimate business intersected with criminal enterprise. Rebecca prepared media packages, each tailored to specific outlets, each containing irrefutable evidence of the new conspiracy. But the enemy wasn't idle. The smear campaign against Walter began with subtle whispers in legal circles, then escalated to anonymous posts on social media. Soon, mainstream outlets were asking questions about the Foundation's financing, about Walter's past, about his relationship with his clients. They're trying to isolate you, Marcus observed during a strategy meeting. Make you toxic, so no one will stand with you. Let them try, Walter replied, but he could feel the pressure building. Donors were pulling back from the Foundation. Some of his young lawyers were being offered lucrative positions elsewhere, bribes disguised as opportunities. Then came the escalation. Walter arrived at the Foundation one morning to find it vandalized, windows smashed, the words "fraud" and "liar" spray-painted on the walls. But it was what he found inside that chilled him. Photographs of Rebecca at her home, of Marcus at his office, of Jennifer at the safe house. The message was clear. We know where you all are. They want us scared, Walter told his assembled team. They want us to make mistakes, to lash out, to give them legitimate reasons to come after us. So what do? Rebecca asked, trying to hide the tremor in her voice. We give them exactly what they don't expect. Complete transparency. Walter called a press conference for the next day. Not a small gathering, but a massive event in Times Square, broadcast on every screen in the vicinity. Marcus used his wealth to ensure coverage, buying time on networks that might otherwise ignore them. Standing before thousands of people and millions of viewers, Walter didn't defend himself against the accusations. Instead, he confessed to something else entirely. 15 years ago, I failed, he began, his voice carrying across the square. I had evidence of Titan Energy's crimes, and I let them silence me with threats. I became a janitor, not as some noble strategic choice, but because I was broken, defeated, afraid. He held up the fabricated evidence against him. Now they're trying the same tactics. But here's what's different. I'm not alone anymore. We're not alone. On cue, people throughout the crowd held up tablets and phones, each showing evidence Jennifer had uncovered about the Phoenix Initiative. The screens in Times Square synchronized, displaying financial records, recorded conversations, proof of the new conspiracy. They want you to believe I'm a fraud, Walter continued. Maybe I am. Maybe a janitor has no business fighting billionaires and shadow governments. But if I'm a fraud who helped expose the truth. If I'm a liar whose lies freed revolutionary technology. Judge me however you want, but judge them by their actions. The crowd's response was immediate and overwhelming. But Walter noticed something else: figures moving through the mass of people with purpose converging on the stage. Not security, not police, but something else. Dad, we need to go, Rebecca whispered urgently. But it was too late. The figures reached the stage, And Walter recognized the lead man, the scarred security chief from Switzerland, the one who'd escaped arrest. "Mr. Gibson," the man said, his voice amplified by a commandeered microphone. "Prometheus would like a word." Before anyone could react, smoke grenades filled the square. Not harmful, but thick and disorienting. In the chaos, Walter felt hands grab him, pulling him through the crowd. He fought back, but these weren't street thugs, they were professionals. When the smoke cleared, Walter was gone. He awoke in a room that could have been anywhere. No windows, indirect lighting, the subtle hum of ventilation. Sitting across from him was a figure in shadow. Face obscured but voice unmistakably cultured, refined and familiar. "Hello, Walter. I've been watching you for a very long time." Walter tested his bond's zip ties professionally applied. "Prometheus, I presume?" "Such dramatic names you give things. I prefer to think of myself as a custodian of necessary evolution." The figure leaned forward, and Walter's blood froze. He knew that face, older now, but unmistakable. Harrison Blackwood. The lawyer who'd abandoned Marcus, who'd taken the bribe, who'd started this whole chain of events. "Surprised you shouldn't be. Everything that happened was orchestrated. Even your victory." Walter's mind raced. "You're lying." "Am I?" "Who do you think ensured Diana Chen was so obviously corrupt? Who made sure you were in the right position to help Marcus? Who provided the information Jennifer discovered? You were my instrument, Walter. You accomplished exactly what I needed." The Council's destruction. The Council's evolution. They were old, ossified, unable to adapt. Their methods were becoming too visible, too vulnerable. I needed them removed so something better could take their place. And I needed a hero to do it, someone the public would trust, someone whose victory would feel earned. Blackwood stood pacing the room. Project Aurora was always going to be released. The question was how. If it emerged through normal channels, it would be revolutionary. But released through struggle, through sacrifice, through a narrative of good versus evil, it becomes mythological, untouchable. "You're insane." "I'm practical. The Phoenix Initiative already controls 40% of Aurora production. Within 2 years, it will be 70%. We'll be the heroes who brought free energy to the masses while quietly ensuring that dependency simply shifts from oil to us. The people won't let you. The people will thank us. They'll celebrate their victory while we shape their future. You gave them a beautiful story, Walter. The janitor who saved the world. They'll tell it for generations, never realizing it was all orchestrated." Walter tested his bonds again, finding them unbreakable. "Why tell me this?" "Because I'm offering you a choice. Join us. Help shape this new world. Your foundation can continue its work. Your daughter can have the career she deserves. Marcus can be the innovator he dreams of being. All under our guidance, of course. Or you become the tragic ending to your own story. The hero who went too far, who became corrupted by power, who had to be stopped. We have enough manufactured evidence to destroy not just you, but everyone who stood with you." Blackwood produced a tablet showing surveillance footage, Rebecca taking money from someone, clearly edited but convincing. Marcus meeting with competitors to Aurora, the context removed to suggest betrayal. Jennifer accessing classified systems, her white hat hacking reframed as criminal. 24 hours, Walter. Decide if you want to be remembered as a hero or exposed as a fraud. The lights went out, and when they came back on, Walter was alone. The door was unlocked. He stumbled out into an alley in Manhattan, his phone in his pocket showing dozens of missed calls. He called Rebecca first. "Dad, where have you been?" "It's been 6 hours." "Listen carefully. All of you get to the foundation. Now, we need to talk." Within an hour, they were assembled in the Foundation's conference room. Walter told them everything, Blackwood's revelation, the choice offered, the threats made. "He played us," Marcus said, his face pale. "From the beginning, we were just pieces on his board." "Maybe," Walter said. "But even if that's true, we still accomplished something real. Aurora is out there. People are building it, improving it, sharing it. That can't be undone. But they'll control it eventually, Jennifer said despairingly. We just traded one master for another. No. Walter stood, his resolve crystallizing. Blackwood made a mistake. He assumed that because he orchestrated the beginning, he controls the ending. But stories have a life of their own once they're released into the world. He turned to Rebecca. Remember what you said in Switzerland, that we were broadcasting everything, making it impossible to hide. We do the same thing now. We tell the truth, all of it, including how we were manipulated. That'll destroy everything we've built, Marcus protested. People will lose faith in Aurora, in the movement. Or they'll realize that even manipulated heroes can choose to be real ones, that even orchestrated victories can become genuine ones if we choose to make them so. Walter moved to the window, looking out at the city lights. Blackwood thinks he's writing our story, but every story needs an ending, and he hasn't written that yet. We have 24 hours to write it ourselves. What do you have in mind? Agent Carver asked. She'd arrived during the discussion, having tracked Walter's phone. We're going to do what janitors do best, Walter said with a slight smile. We're going to clean house, but this time, we're not just exposing the mess, we're going to show people how to clean it up themselves. The next 24 hours were a blur of activity. But instead of trying to fight Blackwood directly or refute his claims, Walter and his team did something unexpected. They confirmed them. At exactly noon, 24 hours after Blackwood's ultimatum, Walter stood again in Times Square. But this time, he wasn't alone. Thousands had gathered, people who'd built Aurora devices, who'd been helped by the Foundation, who'd been inspired by the story of the janitor who'd fought the powerful. I have a confession, Walter began, his voice carrying to millions. We were manipulated. The entire exposure of the council, my involvement, even our victory, it was orchestrated by someone smarter than us, someone who used our genuine desire for justice to serve his own ends. He explained everything, holding nothing back. The crowd grew silent, processing this revelation. In his hidden location, Blackwood watched with satisfaction, thinking Walter was destroying himself. But then Walter continued. But here's what our manipulator didn't understand: truth, once released, can't be controlled. Justice, once tasted, can't be forgotten. We may have been tools, but tools can choose their purpose. He held up a simple device, one of the Aurora generators built by a high school student in Bangladesh. This wasn't part of anyone's plan. This was built by a 16-year-old who downloaded the specs and improved them. Thousands of innovations like this are happening globally, outside anyone's control. Marcus stepped forward. The Phoenix Initiative thinks they'll control Aurora production. But we're releasing Generation 2 today, simpler, cheaper, buildable, with components available at any hardware store. No rare earth minerals required. Jennifer took the microphone next. And we're launching the Aurora Network, a decentralized blockchain-based system for sharing improvements and innovations. No corporation, no government, no shadowy organization can control it. Rebecca added her voice. Every journalist here is receiving a complete data package, not just about the Phoenix Initiative, but about how to recognize and expose future attempts at control. We're not just revealing the conspiracy, we're teaching everyone how to spot the next one. The crowd's energy shifted from shock to determination. Chants began. No more shadows. No more shadows. Walter felt his phone vibrate. Blackwood's number. You fool, the voice hissed. You've destroyed everything. The chaos this will cause. The freedom this will cause, Walter corrected. You were right about one thing, Blackwood. Stories matter. But you forgot that once told, they belong to everyone. And everyone gets to write the ending. He hung up and addressed the crowd one final time. They want us to believe we need them, need their control, their guidance. But the truth is, we only need each other. The janitor doesn't defeat the king. The janitor shows everyone else that the king is just a man standing on a pedestal built from their labor. The response was overwhelming. Within hours, Aurora Generation 2 spread faster than any technology in history. Communities that had waited for corporate production started building their own. The Phoenix Initiative's carefully constructed monopoly crumbled before it could solidify. But there were casualties. That night, 3 attempts were made on Walter's life. Rebecca's apartment was ransacked. Her research destroyed, though she'd anticipated this and kept copies. Marcus faced a hostile takeover attempt of his remaining companies, fighting it off only through emergency injunctions and the public support that made his board unwilling to betray him openly. Agent Carver brought news that made it all worthwhile. Blackwood's been arrested. Once you confirmed the conspiracy publicly, we had grounds to investigate. We found everything: the Phoenix Initiative's entire structure, their plans, their assets. It's the largest RICO case in history. He'll have the best lawyers money can buy, Walter said tiredly. Yes, he will, but he'll be facing the Gibson Legal Justice Foundation, won't he? Walter smiled at that. The foundation had received more donations in the past day than in the previous 6 months. Lawyers were volunteering. Students were applying for internships, and communities worldwide were requesting help establishing their own legal defense funds. A month later, Walter stood in the renovated foundation headquarters, now expanded to 3 floors. The walls were covered with photos, not of victories in court, but of communities building Aurora devices, of people helping each other, of the invisible becoming visible. Maria Rodriguez entered with her children, the oldest now enrolled in law school, with the scholarship Walter had established. Mr. Gibson Tommy would have been so proud. He would have been proud of all of us, Walter replied. Marcus joined them, showing plans for Aurora Generation 3, even simpler, even more accessible. We're going to make it so easy to build that teaching it becomes part of basic education worldwide. Rebecca had published her book about the entire experience, donating all proceeds to the foundation. It topped bestseller lists globally, but more importantly, it became a manual for recognizing and resisting systematic control. Jennifer had been hired by the United Nations to establish a global monitoring system for corporate conspiracy, using the same tools she'd developed to expose the Council and the Phoenix Initiative. As the sun set over Manhattan, Walter stood where it had all began, in the courthouse, where he'd stepped forward as a janitor to defend a billionaire. The building was closing for the day, and he watched the cleaning staff beginning their work. One of them, a young woman, recognized him and approached hesitantly. Mr. Gibson, I just wanted to say thank you. My family has power now, real power for the first time, because of what you did. Because of what we all did, Walter corrected gently. I just cleaned up the mess. Others made sure it stayed clean. She smiled and returned to her work, and Walter watched her go with deep satisfaction. She wasn't invisible anymore. None of them were. His phone rang. An unknown number, but he answered anyway. Mr. Gibson, a young voice said nervously. My name is David Chen. Diana Chen was my aunt. I'm a law student, and I want to help. I want to make up for what my family did. Would the foundation consider taking me as an intern? Walter thought of cycles of redemption, of how even the worst stories could have better endings if people chose to write them. Come by tomorrow morning, he said. We'll talk. As he left the courthouse, Walter realized that Blackwood had been wrong about one crucial thing. He'd said Walter's story was orchestrated, that his victory was planned. But standing there watching the city pulse with life and possibility, Walter understood the truth. The story had never been about him. It had been about everyone who'd been invisible, everyone who'd been overlooked, everyone who'd been told they didn't matter. He'd just been the one who happened to step forward first. The janitor hadn't saved the billionaire. The janitor had reminded everyone that they could save themselves. And that, Walter thought as he headed home to prepare for tomorrow's cases, was a story no one could control.